This story is inspired by real-life situations and includes fictional elements for entertainment. Not recommended for viewers under 18.
The suburban street in Westchester looked exactly the way a perfect life should look. Quiet lawns, warm porch lights, the faint sound of children laughing inside nearby homes. Daniel had spent years believing his house was one of those safe places where nothing truly broke. But that night, as his wife Olivia's voice cut through the kitchen, sharp, impatient, almost cruel, he realized something had already shattered long before he noticed. "Stop acting like that, Dad," she snapped. "They're not your responsibility." Daniel didn't argue. He simply fell silent. And in that silence, something inside him changed forever. Stories like this rarely begin with betrayal. They begin with a single moment people think will pass. If you're drawn to the fragile secrets hiding behind ordinary lives, stay a little longer. Because some truths only reveal themselves slowly. The Carter house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac in Scarsdale, where the lawns were trimmed with quiet precision and the mailboxes looked almost identical from one driveway to the next. Inside, the kitchen lights cast a warm glow over granite countertops that Olivia had once insisted were an investment in the future. Daniel stood at the counter, holding a folded note from Lily's school. Across the room, Olivia leaned against the refrigerator, still wearing the navy blazer she had worn into Manhattan that morning. Her phone buzzed softly on the table every few minutes. Emails, Slack messages, something work-related. "You didn't tell me she skipped class," Daniel said calmly. Olivia rubbed her temple. "Because I just got home, Daniel. Can we not do this right now?" Daniel unfolded the note again, though he had already read it twice. "She skipped 2 classes," he said, "and the school called 3 times." From the hallway, the faint sound of Lily's bedroom door closing echoed upstairs. Olivia exhaled slowly. "She's 14. That's exactly why it matters." Daniel walked toward the table, placing the note beside Olivia's phone. "She needs structure. Someone has to talk to her." Olivia crossed her arms. "And that someone is you?" Daniel blinked slightly at the tone. "Well, yes," he said. "I mean, I can talk to her tonight." Olivia let out a short laugh, one that didn't carry humor. "Daniel," she said, shaking her head, "you don't have to handle everything." "I'm not trying to handle everything." "Really?" Her voice sharpened. "Because sometimes it feels like you're running the whole house." Daniel stared at her for a moment, confused. "I'm just trying to help. And I didn't ask you to." The words landed harder than Olivia probably intended. Daniel glanced toward the staircase, lowering his voice. "She skipped school, Liv. That's not nothing." Olivia grabbed her phone, scrolling through messages. "I'll talk to her later." Daniel hesitated. "You said that last week." That was when Olivia snapped. Her phone dropped onto the counter with a sharp clack. "For God's sake, Daniel," she said, her voice suddenly rising. "Stop acting like their dad." The kitchen went completely still. Even the faint hum of the refrigerator seemed louder. Daniel didn't move. Olivia exhaled sharply, as if the sentence had been waiting inside her all evening. "They already have a father," she continued, though her tone softened slightly. "You don't have to step into everything." Daniel felt something inside his chest tighten. Their father. The man who hadn't called in 3 years. The man whose name still appeared on school forms, but never at soccer games or parent conferences. Daniel remembered the nights Emma had asked him to read one more story before bed. The mornings Lily had asked for help with algebra. The quiet thanks they sometimes gave him when Olivia worked late. But he didn't say any of that. Instead, he simply nodded once. "Okay," he said quietly. Olivia seemed surprised by how quickly he backed down. Daniel folded the school note again and slid it into the trash. Upstairs, a door creaked open slightly. Lily had probably heard everything. But Daniel didn't go up the stairs. For the first time in 5 years, he stayed exactly where he was. And in that quiet moment, something subtle shifted inside him. Not anger, not resentment, just a quiet understanding. If he wasn't their father, then maybe it was finally time to stop trying to be. Outside, the streetlights flickered on one by one along the silent suburban road. Inside the Carter house, no one realized yet how much those few careless words had just changed. The change did not happen all at once. At first, it was so subtle that no one could quite name it. On Monday morning, Danny awoke before sunrise, just as he always had. The early light filtered through the blinds of the kitchen window, casting pale stripes across the counter. He brewed coffee, the familiar smell filling the quiet house. For years, mornings had followed a predictable rhythm. Dania packing lunches, Emma wandering into the kitchen with tangled hair and sleepy eyes, Lily scrolling through her phone while pretending not to listen to whatever advice he offered about school. But that morning, Dania simply poured himself a cup of coffee and sat at the table. The refrigerator door remained closed. The lunchboxes stayed on the shelf where they had always been. Upstairs, he heard footsteps. Emma first, then Lily. Emma entered the kitchen slowly. "Morning," she said, rubbing one eye. "Morning," Dania replied. Emma opened the fridge, looking confused for a moment. "Did Mom already pack lunches?" No, Daniel said gently. I think she planned to do that today. Emma hesitated, glancing at him. Usually, he would already be sliding a sandwich into a container, reminding her not to forget her math homework. Today, he simply sipped his coffee. Oh, she said quietly. A few minutes later, Lily appeared, earbuds hanging loosely around her neck. She opened the refrigerator, frowned, and then turned to Daniel. Are we out of food or something? Daniel shook his head slightly. No, there's bread in the cabinet. Lily stared at him for a second, confused by the calm detachment in his voice. You didn't make lunch? I figured you might want to choose your own today. It sounded reasonable enough. Lily shrugged and grabbed a slice of bread, but Emma kept watching him. Daniel stood after a moment and grabbed his briefcase. I'm heading out a little early today, he said. Emma blinked. Already? Yeah. He gave her a small smile before walking toward the door. Outside, the cold morning air felt strangely clean against his face. Inside the house, the silence he left behind felt unfamiliar. The second change happened 3 days later. An email arrived from Scarsdale Middle School while Daniel was at his desk in Manhattan. Parent-teacher conference reminder. Lily Carter, Thursday, 4:30 p.m. Daniel stared at the message for a long moment. Normally, he would have already marked the time on his calendar. Instead, he closed the email. That evening, Olivia mentioned the meeting while scrolling through her phone at the dinner table. I might have to reschedule Lily's conference, she said casually. Work is insane this week. Daniel continued eating. You usually go anyway, Olivia added without looking up. He wiped his mouth with a napkin. You should probably handle it, he said. Olivia finally looked at him. What? You're her parent? The sentence was simple. Too simple. Olivia frowned slightly, trying to read his tone. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, Daniel said calmly. He stood and carried his plate to the sink. The conversation ended there, but the shift didn't go unnoticed. Emma noticed first. That Saturday morning she came downstairs holding a small stack of worksheets. Daniel, she said softly, can you help me with fractions? Daniel was sitting on the couch reading something on his tablet. For years, math homework had been their quiet routine. He looked up at her. For a brief moment something almost moved behind his eyes. Then he remembered Olivia's voice in the kitchen. Stop acting like their dad. You should ask your mom, he said gently. Emma blinked. She's on a call. I'm sure she'll help when she's done. Emma nodded slowly. Okay. She walked back upstairs, her footsteps quieter than usual. Lily noticed next, not immediately, but gradually. Daniel no longer asked where she was going when she left the house. He didn't check if she finished homework. He didn't mention the missing school assignments. At first, she thought it was freedom. Then, it started to feel strange. One evening, she passed him in the hallway. Hey, she said casually. Hey. That's it? Daniel gave a small shrug. What else should I say? Lily frowned slightly. For years, he had been annoyingly involved in everything. Now he seemed distant, almost like a polite roommate. Olivia noticed last, but even she began to feel something subtle changing in the house. One night, while standing in the kitchen alone, she realized something strange. The house was quieter, not peaceful, just emptier. She glanced toward the living room where Daniel sat reading. For a moment, she almost said something. Instead, her phone buzzed with a new message. Ethan still awake? I just finished reviewing your campaign pitch. Olivia smiled faintly and typed back. Across the room, Daniel didn't look up. And in that quiet distance between them, the Carter family began slowly drifting apart, without anyone fully understanding how far the silence would go. By the time Olivia stepped out of the Metro North train at Grand Central Terminal, the quiet tension of the morning already felt far away. Manhattan had a way of doing that. The city moved too quickly to hold on to domestic discomfort for long. The marble floors echoed with footsteps, announcements bounced off the high ceilings, and thousands of people moved with quiet urgency toward lives that seemed endlessly in motion. Olivia walked toward Lexington Avenue with practiced efficiency, heels clicking against the pavement. Her phone buzzed twice before she even reached the corner. Slack messages, campaign notes, a reminder for the Hallstrom Automotive account pitch later that afternoon. The elevator ride to the 24th floor of Bennett and Archer Advertising smelled faintly of coffee and perfume. When the doors opened, the familiar hum of the creative department greeted her voices bouncing between desks, the soft tapping of keyboards, giant screens displaying half-finished campaign visuals. This world felt alive, and Olivia knew how to survive in it. Morning, Olivia. The voice came from across the open office. Ethan Clark leaned casually against the glass wall of the conference room, a tablet in one hand. He looked like the kind of man who had been designed specifically for advertising, tall, confident, with an easy smile that always seemed slightly amused by the world around him. Morning, Olivia replied, slipping her coat over the back of her chair. Did you see the revised pitch deck? He asked. Not yet. You're going to like slide 8. Olivia opened the file on her laptop while Ethan walked over. He leaned slightly behind her chair, pointing to the screen. The slide showed a bold campaign concept, sleek imagery, sharp tagline. Olivia's eyebrows lifted. "This is good," she admitted. Ethan grinned. "Good?" he repeated. "That's all I get?" She turned slightly in her chair. "You want applause? I settle for admiration." Olivia laughed quietly. Moments like this had become common during the past few months. Ethan had joined the agency earlier that year, and within weeks, the two of them had developed an effortless professional rhythm. Olivia understood strategy. Ethan understood storytelling. Together, they won clients. And in advertising, winning clients meant everything. "You're staying late tonight, right?" Ethan asked casually. Olivia hesitated. "Probably." "Good," he said. "We'll need time to polish the presentation." He walked back toward the conference room, leaving behind the faint smell of cedar cologne. Olivia watched him for a second longer than necessary before turning back to her screen. By 6 o'clock, the office had begun to thin out. The creative department always stayed later than the rest of the building. Ideas rarely respected normal work hours. Olivia rubbed her eyes and leaned back in her chair. Across the room, Ethan was still working at the large presentation screen. "Come, look at this," he called. She walked over. He had adjusted the campaign tagline again. "Drive the future before it arrives," he read aloud. Olivia tilted her head. "Better." "Better?" Ethan said again with mock offense. "You're really stingy with compliments." "I give them when they're earned." Ethan leaned against the table. "You know what I like about working with you?" Olivia folded her arms lightly. "What?" "You actually care." She raised an eyebrow. "That's a strange compliment." "Not in this industry," he said. "Most people just want credit. You actually want the work to be good." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside the windows, Manhattan glowed in layers of gold and white light. Olivia suddenly realized how quiet the office had become. "You heading home soon?" Ethan asked. "Eventually," he nodded slowly. "You ever feel like this place becomes your real life?" he asked. Olivia gave a faint smile. "Sometimes it feels more real than home." The words slipped out before she could reconsider them. Ethan studied her face for a second. "Rough week?" he asked gently. Olivia hesitated. Images flashed briefly in her mind. Daniel's quiet voice, the strange stillness in the house, the way Emma had looked confused at breakfast that morning. "It's nothing," Olivia said finally. Ethan didn't push. Instead, he grabbed 2 paper cups from the coffee station and handed one to her. "Late night survival kit," he said. She accepted it. Their fingers brushed briefly. A tiny, almost accidental moment, but something in the air shifted. Not dramatic, not obvious, just a faint awareness that neither of them acknowledged out loud. Across the darkening office floor, the city lights reflected against the glass walls like distant stars. And somewhere between strategy meetings, campaign slides, and quiet late nights, Olivia began spending more time in a world where someone else noticed her. A world where admiration came easily. A world that felt dangerously uncomplicated. Back in Scarsdale, Daniel had already turned off the lights and gone to bed. But in Manhattan, Olivia's night was only just beginning. The first call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Olivia was halfway through reviewing a campaign draft when her phone vibrated across the conference table. Scarsdale High School flashed across the screen. She hesitated before answering. "Hello? Mrs. Carter?" the voice asked politely. "This is Vice Principal Andrews." Olivia straightened slightly in her chair. "Yes, we're calling about Lily. She left campus during lunch today and didn't return for her afternoon classes." Olivia blinked. "What do you mean she left?" "She and 2 other students walked off school grounds." Olivia rubbed her temple. "I see. Normally, calls like this would go to Daniel first. He was the one who had listed himself as the primary contact for the girls at school. The one who answered emails, attended meetings, and followed up with teachers. But Olivia had changed that form 2 weeks earlier. It had seemed reasonable at the time. Now, the responsibility sat entirely in her lap. "I'll talk to her tonight," Olivia said. "Thank you," the administrator replied. When the call ended, Olivia stared at her phone for a long moment. Then, she opened the message thread. "Olivia, where are you?" 3 dots appeared. "Lily, relax, I'm with friends." Olivia exhaled slowly. That evening, the house felt tense long before Lily even walked through the door. Daniel sat in the living room reading, the quiet glow of a table lamp illuminating the pages of a book he had already been pretending to read for 20 minutes. From the kitchen, Olivia kept glancing at the front door. At 6:30, it finally opened. Lily stepped inside, headphones around her neck. "Hi," she said casually. Olivia crossed her arms. "You're at school today." Lily shrugged. "So?" "So?" Olivia repeated. "It was just lunch. You skipped 2 classes." Lily tossed her backpack on the floor. "Why does it matter?" Olivia's voice rose. "Because you're not supposed to walk off campus." Lily rolled her eyes. "You sound like Daniel." The room went quiet. Daniel did not look up from his book. Olivia glanced toward him, as if expecting him to step in the way he always had before. He didn't. Instead, he slowly turned the page. Lily noticed too. Her eyes shifted between them. "Wait," she said slowly. "You're not going to say anything?" Daniel lifted his gaze briefly. "Your mom seems to have it handled." The calmness in his voice felt unfamiliar. Lily frowned. "That's weird." Olivia snapped. "Lily, go to your room." Lily shrugged again and grabbed her backpack. But before walking upstairs, she looked once more at Daniel. For the first time since she could remember, he had nothing to say. Emma felt the changes even more quietly. She stopped asking Daniel for help with homework. She stopped bringing her drawings downstairs to show him. Instead, she spent more time alone in her room. One evening, Olivia knocked softly on her door. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring in a notebook. "What are you working on?" Olivia asked. Emma turned the page slightly. It was a drawing of their house. 4 stick figures stood outside. Olivia studied it for a moment. "You forgot someone," she said gently. Emma shook her head. "No." Olivia frowned. "There are only 3 people." Emma kept coloring without looking up. "That's who lives here." The sentence landed softly but heavily. Olivia felt something twist inside her chest. Later that night, Olivia found Daniel in the kitchen. He was rinsing a coffee mug at the sink. "You heard the conversation earlier," she said. Daniel nodded. "Yes." "And you didn't say anything." He dried the mug slowly with a towel. "You asked me not to." Olivia's jaw tightened. "That's not what I meant, isn't it?" She hesitated. For a moment, the kitchen felt too quiet. "I just didn't want you acting like you were replacing their father," Olivia said defensively. Daniel leaned against the counter. "I understand. That doesn't mean you have to completely disappear." "I haven't disappeared." He gestured calmly around the room. "I'm still here." The words sounded simple, but Olivia knew exactly what he meant. He was present, just no longer responsible, no longer invested. The difference was becoming harder to ignore. 2 days later, another email arrived from school. Then another. Late assignments, missed homework, unexcused absences. Olivia stared at the screen in frustration. Across the room, Daniel sat quietly working on his laptop. She almost asked him for help. Almost. But the memory of her own words lingered like an echo she couldn't erase. "Stop acting like their dad." So instead, Olivia closed the email and tried to handle everything herself. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the house that had once felt stable began to tilt off balance. Not because Daniel had left, but because he had stopped holding everything together. The invitation came through a calendar notification. Hallstrom Automotive, Final Campaign Review, Boston Client Office, Thursday. Olivia stared at the screen for a moment. Travel used to feel exciting when she first entered the advertising industry. Flights, hotel rooms, unfamiliar cities, it carried the promise of momentum. Now, it mostly meant longer days and less sleep. Still, the Hallstrom account was one of the agency's biggest campaigns that year, and Ethan would be presenting with her. The train from Manhattan to Boston left just after sunrise. Olivia arrived at Penn Station with a coffee in one hand and her laptop bag over her shoulder. Ethan was already standing near the boarding gate. "Morning," he said when he saw her. "You look suspiciously awake," Olivia replied. "I had 2 espressos. That explains it." They boarded together and found seats across from each other. For the first hour, they worked quietly editing slides, refining phrases, debating word choices for the presentation. The rhythm felt easy, natural. At one point, Ethan leaned back in his seat, stretching slightly. "You know," he said, "we make a good team." Olivia glanced up from her laptop. "Don't get sentimental on me before a client pitch. I'm serious." He tilted his head toward her. "Most partnerships in this industry last about 3 months before egos ruin them." "And ours hasn't?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Not yet." Olivia looked back at the screen, though the comment lingered longer than it should have. The presentation went well. Better than well. By the time the meeting ended, the Hallstrom executives were already discussing expansion ideas for the campaign. When Olivia and Ethan finally stepped outside the glass office tower, the late afternoon sky over Boston had turned a pale gray blue. Ethan loosened his tie. "Okay," he said. "Now we celebrate." Olivia laughed softly. "Celebrate what? Winning. I thought advertising people were supposed to pretend they are humble, only until the client signs the contract." They walked down the street toward a small restaurant near the harbor. The place was quiet, dimly lit, the kind of place where business dinner slowly turned into personal conversations. At first they talked about work, then about the agency, then about everything else. At some point Ethan asked casually, "So how long have you been married?" Olivia traced the rim of her wineglass. 5 years. And? And what? Are you happy? The question hung between them. Outside the window, boats rocked gently against the dark water. Olivia hesitated. I don't know, she admitted quietly. Ethan didn't respond right away. He simply watched her. You deserve to be, he said eventually. The sentence was simple, but the way he said it felt different from ordinary conversation. Something softer, something closer. Later that night, the hotel hallway was almost silent. The rooms were on the same floor. They walked there together after dinner, their footsteps echoing softly against the carpeted corridor. Ethan stopped outside his door. Well, he said lightly, we survived another client meeting. Olivia smiled. Yes, we did. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Ethan said quietly, you looked incredible today, by the way. Olivia blinked. In the presentation? No, he said gently. Just you. The air between them shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. Olivia felt a strange pull of something she hadn't felt in a long time, being noticed in a way that had nothing to do with work performance or household responsibility. Ethan stepped a little closer. If this is inappropriate, he said softly, you can tell me to stop. Olivia didn't speak. And in that moment of silence, the line between admiration and something more complicated quietly disappeared. That same evening, several hundred miles away in Manhattan, Daniel was sitting at a small bar near his office. The place was called The Lantern, a quiet spot where financial analysts and consultants often gathered after work. Across the table sat Marcus Reed, an old colleague Daniel hadn't seen in years. I thought you disappeared into suburban dad life, Marcus said, raising an eyebrow. Daniel smiled faintly. Something like that. So what changed? Daniel took a sip of his drink. Nothing dramatic, he said. Just time. Marcus leaned back in his chair. You should come out with us more often. The team still meets here every couple weeks. Daniel considered that. For years he had rushed home every evening, soccer practice, homework help, dinner routines. Now his evenings were strangely open. Maybe I will, he said. Marcus grinned. There's the Daniel I remember. As the conversation drifted to old projects and office gossip, Daniel felt something unfamiliar returning. Space. Possibility. The quiet rediscovery of a life he had almost forgotten he once had. Back in Boston, the lights inside the hotel hallway eventually dimmed, and somewhere behind a closed door, Olivia crossed a boundary she once believed she would never approach. In Manhattan, Daniel walked home through the cool night air, unaware that the distance between him and his wife had just grown far wider than silence alone could explain. The realization began with something small. It was a rainy Saturday afternoon, the kind where the sky stayed gray all day and the house felt unusually quiet. Emma sat at the dining table with a sheet of math homework spread in front of her. For almost 20 minutes she had been staring at the same fraction problem. Across the room, Daniel sat on the couch reading. The sound of rain tapping against the windows filled the silence. Emma glanced up at him. Normally she would have walked straight over, sliding the paper onto the coffee table. Daniel, I don't get this. That used to be enough. He would explain it patiently, sometimes drawing little diagrams until the numbers made sense. Today she hesitated. Then she slowly stood up and walked toward him anyway. Daniel, she said quietly. He looked up from his book. Yes? Emma held out the paper. Can you help me with this one? For a brief moment, Daniel's eyes softened. He recognized the worksheet immediately. Fractions again. Emma had struggled with them all year. He opened his mouth slightly, then stopped. Something flickered behind his expression. A memory. Stop acting like their dad. Daniel closed the book slowly. You should ask your mom, he said gently. Emma blinked. But she's upstairs. I'm sure she'll come down soon. Emma didn't move. But you always help me. Daniel hesitated. His voice remained calm, but something about it sounded distant. Not this time. Emma lowered the paper slowly. Okay, she whispered. She walked back to the table without looking at him again. Lily noticed the change a few minutes later. She had been lying on the living room floor, scrolling through her phone. When Emma returned to the table, her eyes looked suspiciously glossy. What's wrong with you? Lily asked. Emma shrugged. Nothing. Lily glanced toward Daniel, then back at Emma. Did you ask him about the math? Emma nodded. And? He said to ask Mom. Lily frowned. That's weird. She sat up slightly. Daniel always helps with math. Emma didn't answer. Lily stared at Daniel for a moment longer. Something about the way he sat there quiet, focused on his book, felt strangely unfamiliar. Not angry, not annoyed, just distant. The memory came back to Lily later that night. She was brushing her teeth when she suddenly remembered the argument from a few weeks earlier. The one in the kitchen. Her mother's voice. Stop acting like their dad. At the time, Lily had rolled her eyes and gone back to her room. Now the sentence felt different. He had changed right after that, almost immediately. Lily rinsed her mouth slowly, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Oh, she whispered softly. The confrontation happened 2 days later. Olivia had just come home from Manhattan, her laptop bag still over her shoulder, when Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Can I ask you something?" Olivia glanced up. "Sure." Lily crossed her arms. "Why doesn't Daniel help with anything anymore?" Olivia frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "He used to check homework, talk to teachers, drive Emma places." Olivia sat her back down. "Well, you girls are getting older. That's not the reason." The certainty in Lily's voice made Olivia pause. "What are you talking about?" Lily looked directly at her. "You told him to stop acting like our dad." The words landed harder than Olivia expected. "Lily, I heard you," Lily interrupted. Emma stood quietly behind her in the hallway, listening. "You said it in the kitchen." Olivia felt a sudden wave of defensiveness. "I didn't mean it like that." "Then how did you mean it?" Olivia hesitated. For the first time, she didn't have a clear answer. "I just meant she started, then stopped." Lily shook her head. "Do you know what's weird?" "What?" He actually listened. The sentence carried a strange mixture of frustration and disbelief. Lily glanced toward the living room where Daniel was working quietly on his laptop. "He used to care about everything," she continued. "Now he doesn't care about anything." Emma spoke for the first time. "He used to read to me," she said softly. Olivia looked between them. "You're both overthinking this." But the words sounded weak even to her own ears. Lily exhaled slowly. "You told him he wasn't our dad," she said, "so he stopped acting like one." The truth sat heavily in the kitchen. Emma looked down at the floor. Lily turned and walked toward the stairs. Neither girl said goodnight that evening. Later that night, Olivia stood alone in the kitchen. The house was quiet again. Daniel entered a moment later, pouring himself a glass of water. "They talked to you?" he asked calmly. Olivia nodded. "They figured it out." Daniel leaned against the counter. "I thought they might." She studied him carefully. "You could have explained." "I didn't think that was my place." Olivia felt irritation rising. "You're punishing them for something I said." Daniel shook his head slowly. "No." He met her eyes. "I'm respecting what you asked for." Olivia opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Because for the first time, she began to see something she hadn't fully understood before. Daniel hadn't walked away from the family. He had simply stepped exactly where she told him to stand. And now everyone in the house was beginning to feel the emptiness that followed. The truth arrived on a Thursday evening. Not through suspicion, not through careful investigation. Just a moment of coincidence that Daniel almost ignored. He was finishing work at the office in Manhattan when Marcus Reed leaned casually against the doorway of his glass-walled workspace. "You heading out?" Marcus asked. "In a minute." Marcus nodded toward the street outside. "Come grab a drink with us. Couple people from marketing are meeting downstairs." Daniel hesitated. For years he would have declined automatically. Now his evenings were different. "Sure," he said. The bar was crowded in the soft golden light of early evening. A group of Marcus's colleagues already sat around a long table near the back. Conversations overlapped project deadlines, office gossip, someone complaining about a client. Daniel listened quietly, nursing a drink. At some point Marcus introduced him to a woman named Claire, who worked for another advertising firm across town. "Bennett and Archer," she said when explaining where she worked. Daniel felt a flicker of recognition. "That's my wife's agency," he said. Claire raised an eyebrow. "Wait, Olivia Bennett?" Daniel nodded. "You know her?" Claire hesitated for half a second. "Only professionally," she said. Her tone shifted slightly. Not dramatically, just enough for Daniel to notice. "She's good," Claire added carefully. "Everyone in the industry talks about that Hallstrom campaign." Daniel smiled faintly. "She worked hard on it." Claire nodded. "Yeah, her and Ethan Clark." Daniel took a sip of his drink. "They partnered on that project." "Seems like more than a project lately," Claire said before catching herself. Marcus glanced between them. "What does that mean?" Claire waved a hand quickly. "Nothing, probably just agency gossip." But Daniel's attention had sharpened. "What kind of gossip?" he asked calmly. Claire shifted in her seat. "Well, you know how people talk during conferences and client trips." Daniel waited. "They were pretty close during the Boston meetings last month," she said carefully. "I only mentioned it because I didn't realize you were her husband." The table blew quieter. Daniel felt a strange stillness settle inside his chest. Not shock, not anger, just a slow rearranging of pieces that suddenly fit together. Late nights, Boston, the distance that had grown between them. Marcus cleared his throat awkwardly. "People exaggerate things," he said. Daniel nodded slightly. "Sometimes they do." But something in his voice sounded distant. Later that night, Daniel walked through the quiet streets of Manhattan alone. The air had turned colder. Traffic lights reflected on the wet pavement. He thought about the past few months. Olivia coming home later, her phone lighting up with messages she never explained. The way she seemed emotionally airfare even when sitting in the same room. And strangely enough, Daniel didn't feel the anger he once imagined betrayal would bring. What he felt instead was clarity. Something had already ended long before tonight. Tonight had simply given it a name. When Daniel returned to the house in Scarsdale, the lights were still on in the kitchen. Olivia stood at the counter scrolling through her phone. "You're late," she said without looking up. Daniel placed his keys on the table. "I stopped for a drink after work." Olivia nodded absently. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Daniel said quietly, "How was Boston?" Olivia's hand paused. "Fine. Good meetings?" "Yes." Daniel watched her carefully. "Did Ethan enjoy the trip?" Olivia looked up quickly. "Why are you asking that?" Daniel held her gaze for a long moment. Then he exhaled slowly. "Because someone mentioned they saw the two of you together." Silence spread through the kitchen. Olivia's face shifted, first confusion, then tension. "Daniel, you don't need to explain," he said gently. That surprised her more than anger would have. "What do you mean?" Daniel leaned against the counter. "I mean, I understand." Her voice rose slightly. "You understand what?" "That you've moved on." Olivia stared at him. "I didn't say that." Daniel nodded. "No," he said calmly, "but your actions did." The quiet certainty in his voice made the room feel smaller. "Are you accusing me of something?" Olivia asked defensively. Daniel shook his head. "I'm acknowledging something." He picked up his keys again. "I'm going to stay with Marcus for a while." Olivia blinked. "What?" "I think it's better if we take some space." "You're leaving?" Daniel looked around the kitchen slowly. The house he had held together for 5 years. "I think I already did," he said quietly. The sentence hung in the air. Olivia felt a strange wave of panic rising in her chest. "Daniel, wait!" But he was already walking toward the door. He didn't slam it. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stepped outside into the cool night air and closed the door gently behind him. Inside the house, Olivia stood alone in the kitchen, and for the first time, the life she had been living in two separate worlds finally collided. Winter arrived slowly that year. By early December, the trees along the streets of Scarsdale stood bare, their branches thin against the gray sky. Inside the Carter house, the rooms felt larger than Olivia remembered. Not physically larger, just quieter. The first few weeks after Daniel left had passed in a blur of logistics lawyers, paperwork, awkward conversations with the girls. At first Olivia told herself the separation was temporary, a cooling-off period, something they would eventually talk through. But months had passed. Daniel had not come back. One Saturday morning, Olivia sat alone at the kitchen table scrolling through emails. The same granite countertops, the same warm light above the sink. But the rhythm of the house had changed. Lily now packed her own lunch without being asked. Emma spent most mornings drawing quietly in her room. They spoke to Olivia politely, but the easy warmth that once filled the house had faded. It wasn't anger, it was distance, the kind that grew slowly when trust became uncertain. Olivia rubbed her eyes and glanced toward the empty living room. For years Daniel had been there, every morning coffee in hand, quietly reading the news before anyone else woke up. Now the couch sat undisturbed. She reached for her phone. A message thread with Ethan sat near the top of the screen. "Ethan, still thinking about that campaign idea? Drinks tonight?" Olivia stared at the message. There had been a time when text like that made her smile instantly. Now the excitement felt strangely thin. The late nights, the whispered conversations, the sense of being admired. It had all felt intoxicating when her life at home had begun to feel complicated. But something about it no longer carried the same weight. She typed the response. "Olivia, not tonight. I'm staying in with the girls." A few seconds later, the phone buzzed. "Ethan, another time then." Olivia placed the phone face down on the table. Across the Hudson River, Daniel's new apartment overlooked a quiet street in Jersey City. It wasn't large. A small living room, a narrow kitchen, one bedroom. But it felt calm. Daniel stood by the window, holding a mug of coffee, watching early morning traffic move slowly toward Manhattan. His life had settled into a new rhythm. Work during the week, occasional dinners with Marcus or colleagues, long walks through the city when he needed quiet. At first the silence had felt strange. He had spent years surrounded by the noise of family life, homework questions, arguments, laughter echoing through the house. Now the quiet felt different. Not lonely, just peaceful. His phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Lily. "Lily, hey, are you busy?" Daniel smiled slightly. "Daniel, not really. What's up?" The reply came a minute later. "Lily, Emma needs help with math again." Daniel chuckled softly. Some things never changed. "Daniel, tell her I'll video call in 10 minutes. Another pause, then a second message appeared. "Lily, Mom says hi." Daniel stared at the screen for a moment, then he typed back. "Daniel, tell her I hope she's doing well." That evening, Olivia stood in the kitchen again, the same place where everything had shifted months earlier. Emma sat at the table, solving fractions while Daniel's voice echoed through a laptop screen. "See the denominator here?" he explained patiently. "You just need to make them the same." Emma nodded eagerly. "Oh, I get it now." Lily leaned against the counter, listening quietly. Olivia watched the scene from across the room. Daniel looked relaxed on the screen, sitting in his small apartment with a cup of coffee beside him. For a moment, she remembered something she hadn't thought about in a long time. The steady way he used to hold the family together without asking for recognition. The endless small things he had done. School emails, homework help, late-night conversations with Lily when she was struggling, bedtime stories for Emma. None of it had seemed extraordinary at the time. Just part of life. Just something she assumed would always be there. Emma closed her notebook happily. "Thanks, Daniel." "You're welcome." Lily added quietly. "Good night." "Good night." The call ended. The kitchen fell silent again. Emma carried her notebook upstairs. Lily followed a moment later. Olivia remained standing by the counter. The quiet returned. But this time it felt different. Because now she understood something she hadn't seen clearly before. Daniel had never tried to replace the girl's father. He had simply stepped in where someone else had left emptiness. And the moment she pushed him away from that place, the balance of the entire family had shifted. Olivia looked around the kitchen slowly. The same house, the same life, but something essential was gone. And the painful truth settled gently but permanently in her chest. Sometimes the people we believe will always stay are the ones quietly holding everything together. And sometimes silence doesn't destroy a family all at once. It simply leaves behind the space where someone used to be.